Hello and welcome to Business Incorporated. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago. On the program today, economic analysts continue to quantify and qualify the economic losses of the ongoing unrest in Nigeria. And S&P cut Zambia to default after Eurobond payment was missed. US and Europe head for a clash over their preferred candidates to lead the World Trade Organization. We start off here in Nigeria as the economic analyst at Codros Capital Limited says they expect Nigeria's GDP to contract by 6.91% in the fourth quarter of this year due to the social unrest fueled by the NSAS protests and the resultant curfew imposed in some parts of the country. The investment firm, in its economy and markets reports released today, projects that the country's GDP will close the year with a negative growth at 4.15%, stressing that the economic impact is likely to be more severe if the unrest and curfew persists beyond this month. The report shows that transport, trade and manufacturing sectors are expected to be the hardest hit, with inflation rates projected to climb as high as 14.80% and 15.58% in November and December this year. Meanwhile, Codros projects that the local equities market will continue to witness the bearish run from this week due to uncertainty in the minds of investors. And to the markets now, the Nigerian Index was on the flat line as at midday as investors continue to monitor developments in the economy. In South Africa, where Nigerians have also taken their grievances to the High Commission, the Jersey Index was down 0.62% also at intraday. In Egypt, the EGX 30 was down 0.96%, while the Kenyan Bourse ended Wednesday's session up 0.06%. And in the Middle East, the Abu Dhabi Index was up 0.29% at intraday, just as the market in Dubai was also 0.66% in positive territory. And a different story in other parts of the Gulf region, as the Qatari and Saudi markets were down 0.07% and 0.14% each. All right, let's look at the European market. Stocks retraced early losses to trade missed on Thursday as investors digested uncertainty over U.S. coronavirus stimulus, new consumer data, and the raft of corporate earnings. The pan-European stock 600 recovered from opening losses to hover around the flat line by early afternoon trade. In travel and leisure, stocks climbed 1.3% to lead gains, while healthcare stocks fell 0.5%. On the data front, German consumer confidence has the JFK's forward-looking index for November coming in at minus 3.1%, down from 1.7 points in October. U.S. stimulus talks remain in focus for global markets, with uncertainty over whether a deal can be reached before the November 3 presidential election. However, comments on stimulus talks from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's Deputy Chief of Staff offered some room for optimism. Markets will be keeping an eye on forthcoming U.S. labor market data, with the latest update to jobless claims totals due later today. Economists polled by Dow Jones expect the labor market to show first-time applicants for state unemployment insurance to have totaled 875,000 during the week ended October 17. And for developments in the UK, let's talk to my colleague there, Juliana. Hello, Juliana. Good afternoon. Well, how are the Nigerians in the UK viewing the developments here in Nigeria?
Chimeze, it's very tense. It's tense, and it's tense thousands of miles away. I think for the first time, I actually saw for myself why people consider Britain to be the 37th state of Nigeria, and that's because there are millions of Nigerians that live here. And yesterday, thousands of Nigerians descended upon the High Commission. They also marched to Parliament as a reaction to what was witnessed on Tuesday evening at the Lekki toll gate. There were a series of different groups that came together. Many of them were led by British members of Parliament. Many of them were led by celebrities and individuals of high profile here in the UK, and there was a lot of anger the morning after, the night before, or shall I say the afternoon after. It definitely seems to have settled down slightly, but there is still lots of raw emotions. I think it's important to say that there are some people who are demonstrating for peace. Not everybody is demonstrating for the hashtag #EndSARS. I know that of course, has been hijacked, and there are so many different miscreants, as it's been called, hijacking the campaign. But there are individuals within the Nigerian community in Britain that are pushing for peace. There are several protests that will be taking place over the next couple of days. Some of them have been cancelled. A lot of them are sporadic. We did hear from several celebrities, of course, it doesn't matter, but they have been putting their name to this. Anthony Joshua, the boxer, being one of them. He posted a video, I think it was late on Tuesday evening. He was calling for peace and solidarity. According to him, he is putting together some sort of palliatives or some sort of rescue packages for Nigerians that could not be able to go to work at the moment. We also actually heard from Dominic Raab. Dominic Raab is the Foreign Secretary. I actually have a statement that he sent out last night. He says, "I'm deeply concerned by the recent violence and continued clashes in Nigeria, and I'm alarmed by widespread reports of civilian deaths. We call for an end to violence. The Nigerian government must urgently investigate reports of brutality at the hands of the security forces and hold those responsible to account." There is a petition actually that's been going around. I'm sure many of our viewers would have been seeing that on WhatsApp. I believe it's reached hundreds of thousands. So there will actually be a debate in the House of Commons. But yesterday it already got brought into there. There's one MP, Stephen Doughty. I believe he represents constituents in Wales. He raised the protests in the House of Commons. Like I said yesterday, there were demonstrations that kicked off sporadically at the High Commission. It led to thousands of people walking to Westminster. There's a big patch of green where you see the statue of the former Prime Minister there. At least 6 MPs came out yesterday from the chambers. They spoke to the demonstrators and they stood out in solidarity. The Archbishop actually spoke on Twitter as well. He obviously has a close relationship with the Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari. He urged for the president to take control of this situation. It's extremely tense, and it just goes to show also just how much feeling and love there is for Nigeria with Nigerians across the world. I've actually been seeing on the Channels TV Twitter account as well that there are protests that are taking place in New York. There are protests and demonstrations taking place across the world. But I think what's really important, and a message that I think must be filtered through, particularly from those in the diaspora, that peace is the most important feeling at the moment.
And while Nigeria is dealing with EndSARS protests, of course, the UK is dealing with Brexit. What's the latest on that?
Well, unfortunately, as we've seen, the world continues. When things are burning, the world does continue to go on, which is a shame, but it's a reality. And yes, unfortunately, Brexit is one of those things that will continue long into the future. Of course, last week we heard from the British government that a lot of these negotiations would be cut off. Alas, that's not the case. We're hearing reports from the Independent newspaper that the EU chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, has given olive branch to Boris Johnson. So the negotiations are still ongoing. I think they're going to take place and keep going over the weekend. And COVID, COVID is still rampant across Britain. There were thousands of protesters out yesterday, but COVID is still a deadly disease and is still, continuing to cause a lot of heartache here in Britain. We know that Manchester, Greater Manchester, I believe this is going to affect over 3 million people, they will be going into a tier 3 lockdown, which means lots of locations will be closing. So yes, amongst all this heartache that Nigerians in Britain are facing, we are still facing here Brexit and COVID, but we are following and monitoring these protests and the sentiments here. Of course, our thoughts are with everybody in Nigeria, and we will be keeping you updated as much as possible, Chimezie.
Absolutely. We continue to track those developments there. Thank you very much, Juliana. We're moving now to Asia. Shares there declined as the International Monetary Fund on Wednesday downgraded its growth forecast for Asia Pacific. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 dipped 0.7%, while the Topix Index fell 1.09%. The Shanghai Composite was down 0.38% to about 3,312 points, while the Shenzhen Component shed 0.533%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index was around the flat line as of its final hour of trading. South Korea's Kospi declined 0.67%. Shares in Australia fell, with the S&P ASX 200 down 0.29% to finish its trading day at 6,173 points. And stock futures are down slightly in the morning as traders continued to watch stimulus talks as markets swing this month on headlines regarding the negotiations. The Dow Jones Industrial Average Futures lost 32 points at the open, while S&P 500 and Nasdaq 100 futures were also down. Thursday's losses were kept in check after shares of Tesla, Coca-Cola, Dow Incorporated, AT&T, and CSX all rose on strong earnings results. And to global oil market now, prices ticked up today but struggled to fully recover from the previous session's losses when a build in U.S. gasoline inventories signaled a deteriorating outlook for fuel demand as coronavirus cases soar. Brent crude futures were up 44 cents at $42.17 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures ticked up 43 cents to $40.46 a barrel. Both contracts shared more than 3% on Wednesday in their steepest daily falls in 3 weeks. U.S. gasoline stocks rose by 1.9 million barrels in the week to October 16. The Energy Information Administration said that compared with the expectations for a 1.8 million barrels drop. And to metals market now, prices slipped today as market hopes for a U.S. coronavirus aid package ahead of the presidential elections waned, in turn bolstering the dollar. Now, spot gold fell 0.4% to $1,917 per ounce after hitting more than a one-week high on Wednesday. U.S. gold futures slipped 0.5% to $1,919. Gold is tracking a gyrating dollar, with investors watching whether a fiscal stimulus plan will be agreed before the election or will have to now wait because of lack of time until the next president has been voted in. Elsewhere, silver fell 1.2% to $24.78. Platinum eased 0.1% to $885.75, and palladium dropped 0.9% to $2,382. And away from the markets, S&P Global Rating Services has cut its assessment of Zambia's debt to selective default after the Southern African nation said it couldn't meet payments and skipped a coupon on its Eurobonds last week. The ratings company didn't wait for the 30-day grace period after the missed coupon payment to expire. This is the latest blow to Zambia, which is trying to convince bondholders to give it a 6-month interest payment holiday while it drafts debt restructuring plans. S&P forecasts that the nation will remain in a default at least through the 6 months. And the U.S. and Europe may be heading for a clash over their preferred candidates to lead the World Trade Organization as the selection of the first woman to run the referee of global commerce enters a pivotal phase. The European Union is inclined to support Nigeria's Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala and may sign off on that position. Other observers say the Trump administration is leaning towards South Korea's Yoon Byung-hee. Meanwhile, China's preference and those of other major economies like Brazil and India remain unclear. The WTO plans to name a new director general next month to replace Brazilian Roberto Azevedo, who stepped down from the job at the end of August, a year before his term ended. He was the 6th consecutive man to lead the 25-year-old organization. And a group of women in Katangwa in Lagos, Nigeria, raking in good profits processing rice amid the COVID-19 outbreak. Not only have they survived, but their business has thrived with demand for local rice growing during the pandemic as the market is no longer flooded with cheap imported rice after borders closed. Let's watch this.
Women living in rural areas make up 43% of the agricultural labor force, and compared to men, are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 due to their work in the informal sector and their lack of access to productive resources, services, technologies, markets, and finances. Thousands of businesses across the world have been forced to close or have seen profits slump due to COVID-19 restrictions. But for the women processing rice in Katangwa in Niger State of Nigeria, not only have they survived, but their business has thrived with profits up by 40%. COVID-19 may have altered the way they work, but it cannot mask the fact that business is booming.
How do we do it? One, we have to observe the social distances. So we worked in shifts. While others work in the morning, others in the evening.
Asabe and her team used to supply rice to the local schools, but when schools shut due to the pandemic, one door may have closed, but another one opened. Closed international borders meant that the market was no longer flooded with cheap imported rice. The result is the price of their rice has gone up over 40%. Set up with financial support from the Nigerian government and the International Fund to Agricultural Development, the Value Chain Development Program has given her training in marketing and finance and access to this rice processing center.
The
project has been so successful that many of the women have become local millionaires. Each woman now earns on average 6 million naira a year, more than senior civil servants in the region. They are able to send their children to school and buy homes and cars.
The rice is, the quality is very, very good. The quality is okay. And the grains, they are well prepared, and it is very good when cooking.
Their productivity has not only benefited the market sellers who can offer a better product, but also the farmers who receive extra money for their crop.
And the trading arm of the Toyota Group has invested $4 million in a Ugandan startup, saying it hopes Tugende's small loans for businessmen in the informal sector will also provide financing for customers to buy Toyota vehicles. Let's watch this.
From London to Los Angeles, many thrift shops and clothing bags outside stores and on the streets have been deluged with more clothes than could be sold, leading to mountains of garments building up in sorting warehouses. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, textile recyclers and exporters have had to cut their prices to shift stock as lockdown measures restrict movement and business slows in end market.
25-year-old Ugandan driver Mark Yahweh has just put a down payment on a new motorbike from India's Hero Motocore. He's been making a living by driving someone else's bike for the last 3 years. Ugandan company Tugende seeks out people like Yahweh to lend funds so that he can operate his own bike. Launched in 2012 in Uganda, Tugende began by offering motorcycle mortgages to riders. The bikers wouldn't get title to the bike until the final payment was made.
For the terms and conditions, I find them to be favorable, because when I go to a private motorcycle owner, he will lend you the motorcycle to drive. Yet, when I come to Tugende, they give you a motorcycle with taxes paid.
Banks are often reluctant to lend money to small or informal businesses in Africa because of the high rate of default. With an asset base of $30 million, Tugende has handed out about 35,000 bike mortgages so far. a small fraction of the Ugandan market, which Tugende estimates has about 800,000 riders.
What we've realized is that there is an enormous demand for credit for small and medium businesses across Africa, and it's very difficult for them to access credit from most standard banks, and even a lot of technology-led lenders are small loans and very expensive. So the Tugende model is all about helping people own income-generating assets where the cash flow they make from their entrepreneurial activities can pay a loan or a mortgage or a hire purchase lease so that they go from renting to owning in a short period of time.
Clients like Jonah Nario say he has been able to expand his transportation business.
I'm now having the seventh bike I have. Before getting the seventh one, I drive a car. I got a car from Tugende of 21 million on lease. I driven it. After driving it, I paid it in cash. I completed the lease of the car, and I came back for the bike which I have now. So what I benefited from Tugende, it's too much. I have a Polota. I'm about to start building. I have kids in big schools.
The financing gap for micro, small and medium enterprises in sub-Saharan Africa is estimated at $331 billion, according to a 2017 report by the International Finance Corporation, the private investment arm of the World Bank.
And as South Africa revises its legal framework to make it easier to take property without paying for it, the nation's land minister has given assurances that the continuous process won't degenerate into a free-for-all. The ruling African National Congress decided in December 2017 to change the constitution to explicitly allow for exploration without compensation. Lawmakers have been deliberating since then how the changes should be effected. The government this month published a revised version of its exploration bill that's been in the works since 2008 and specifies which property can be taken, including land held for speculative purposes or owned by absent landlords. The government has been engaging with investors to clarify why land reform is needed, emphasized that there wouldn't be wholesale gazetting of land for seizure, and designated the courts to be the final arbiters in any disputes. And Morocco's second biggest bank, Bank Central Populaire, is considering selling a significant stake to a lender based in East Asia as it seeks to bolster its capital buffers and find fresh avenues of growth. The sale, which could be enacted through a cash injection, is the linchpin of a 5-year strategy starting in 2001 that the Casablanca-based lender plans to present to shareholders for approval. A strategic partnership with an East Asian lender is expected to put BCP on a new growth path. Under the plan, BCP would begin talks next year with lenders from countries including China and Singapore. A shift toward Asia marks a pivot in Morocco's traditional business links with Europe, where lenders are mostly anchored to counterparts across the Mediterranean, especially France. And that's it on the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu.